Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing a 25.10 jungle tier list of jungle content. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch. Most notably, we saw nerfs towards the likes of Xin Zhao, Vi, Kayn, and Fiddlesticks. We didn't see any direct buffs, but there were a lot of champions which benefited from the mage item changes this patch. There were other champions which ended up falling down a bit, with Liandry's being nerfed, as a lot of them built the item first, as it was a very effective way of clearing the jungle and a very powerful item in general. So losing some power there has definitely hurt a decent amount of champions. Let's get into it. So the detail leads off with Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath has seen a slight spike in pick rate in the jungle with the addition, well, with just the direct buffs he's received. He's not popular by any means, and he doesn't perform particularly well. He's a champion I'd kind of recommend avoiding in the jungle. If you already play him in the mid lane or the top lane, then I would recommend just taking him there. He does scale well, but it's kind of the one good factor about Cho'Gath jungle is that his scaling does give him some level of like power throughout the game, and as long as you're not like punished early, you can get to those points. The other thing is obviously the fact that his ultimate is an incredibly good objective securing tool, but his clear is slow. He doesn't have great ganks potential, and it really causes him to struggle, especially earlier on into the game, and he can be prone to getting invaded. Sylas, even with the mage item changes, isn't gonna escape the D tier. He needs a bit more than that to kind of find his footing in the jungle again. Riot want to keep him weak, and it makes sense. He is already a good mid laner and a relatively healthy one at that. In top lane, he also has a healthy level of presence. So Sylas remains as a relatively weak and not a hugely popular jungler. Skarner is a complete failure of a rework. This champion is back to being the least popular jungler in the game for like their main role. Rek'Sai is a close number 2, but yeah, this champion needs like work done to it. It is incredibly underperforming in solo queue. There are builds which can be opted into to increase his performance, like Overlord's Bloodmail is definitely an item he should be picking up more, but even then, he's a champion I do just recommend avoiding. He's just not that great of an option in solo queue. Maokai is probably towards the higher end of the D tier. I rate him low, and I still will rate him low, but he is not quite as bad as some of the other D tier options. I think the champion did lose power with Liandry's being nerfed this patch, but he does have pretty clear strengths. For point and click CC, he does have a pretty heavily amplified clear, albeit still pretty slow. His ultimate is an incredibly powerful tool though, and just having frontline can be valuable in a lot of situations. He's still underperforming, so he has low agency compared to other options, and it's one of the issues a lot of the tank junglers do have. Nasa sits within the D tier. He is a low elo skewed pick where you can just stack a lot. He has pretty clear weaknesses, but if you can get to those like fantasy points of a champion, then yeah, he can do things, but oftentimes you're not going to, and I would not recommend picking this champion if you are looking for a consistent way of climbing. Shen. I have some people who actually think Shen jungle is a legitimately really good pick. I'm not hugely sold on the champion at the moment. He doesn't clear quite as well as some of the other options. He's pretty reliant on certain team compositions, and I think you are just actively losing a decent amount of agency when you opt into Shen jungle. He's not horrible. I think you can play him if you are very much a Shen enthusiast, but he's not a consistent way of climbing, kind of similar to some of the other D tier picks, and I just can't really promote him for that reason. But there could be an angle where he jumps up into the C tier if you are if you're very comfortable on him and you itemize him correctly, because Shen does have some of the itemization min-maxing which you can do in the jungle to obviously boost his performance, but that's akin to a lot of champions. Most champions do have itemization improvements they can do to boost their overall performance. Gragas is doing a bit better with some of the mage item changes this patch. He still doesn't escape the D tier. Why can't I see him? He should be here, I think, unless I missed him. I have missed him. Yeah, Gragas sits towards the high end of the D tier. He's still a pick I don't really recommend, but he's doing a bit better at the moment. His clear is just a bit slow, and he doesn't really provide as much as some of the other AP junglers, albeit if you are ahead of the curve, kind of akin to Sylas to an extent, then yeah, you can just outright burst people down and accelerate your clear enough to kind of be able to compete with some of the more viable junglers. But I would recommend just completely avoiding this champion unless you're already very comfortable on him. Brand sits towards the high end of the D tier. He has received a couple of buffs to kind of boost his performance, but the nerf towards Liandry's just means he remains as a high D tier pick. If you're comfortable playing him and you like him as a flex pick, then yeah, you can continue to play him. If you don't, I would not recommend learning him. Against most of the D-tier champions, I don't really recommend them. Rengar remains as a D-tier option. He is an incredibly hard champion to pilot, and if you don't already play him, I don't recommend playing him at the moment. And if you already play him, then yeah, you'll continue to play him and probably get results. He is a very, very OTP-dependent champion, if not just outright one of the most OTP-dependent champions in the game. Moving on to the C-tier then. We lead off with Morgana, who had a surge of pick rate because of her buffs last patch. She still underperforms in the jungle at the moment, a pick I just don't really recommend playing. And Liandry's being nerfed does directly affect her. Qiyana is similar to Rengar. If you play her, you'll continue to play her. If you don't already play her, I don't really recommend her. Although she is a bit more performant for the average player, not a huge amount, so she is still going to be a C-tier option. Nidalee, similar vein as both Qiyana and Rengar, where you just have to have a huge amount of mastery and understanding of the champion and be able to play the map incredibly well to get value out of this pick. If you don't, you're better off looking towards other options. Sejuani is pretty close to the D tier. I'm more and more by the day, I feel like I should probably drop her down. She's just a very low agency champion, and she's been pro-jailed for a while. This pick does not perform that well in solo queue, albeit slightly better than some of the other tank options, especially with the health ratio she's had buffed not too long ago on her kit, but she's still a C2 option at the moment. She doesn't perform that well. And Zyra, I'm going to drop down. The nerf towards Liandry combined with Zyra is just not that performant for the average player. I think if you can utilize the tempo of this champion and the free time, the downtime where you've cleared all your camps and how you effectively chunk out laners and then play the map, I think this pick can still be really good. And I believe she still sees some competitive play, although I don't know. I can't remember seeing her more recently. I think she's probably fizzled out a bit. And yeah, I don't really recommend Zyra as much in her current state. Moving up into the B tier are three champions. We lead off with Talia, who is doing a bit better at the moment. The mage item buffs have helped her. She's still not hugely performant, albeit she has some level of OTP performance, which is doing really well. OTPs are doing well on Talia at the moment, but her average kind of performance is not that great. I think if you sink a lot of time into Talia, you can actually do really well on this champion. But as a surface level pick, probably not a champion I'd really recommend. And it kind of lowers her general placement in the tier list. Gwen benefited from Nasha, Rabadon, and Lich Bane being buffed. She is now back up to being a low B tier option. She still underperforms to the average player, but kind of akin to some of the other options down towards the lower end of the table. She does well if you put a lot of time into her. And Rek'Sai is very, very unpopular. As unpopular as Skarner, I think Rek'Sai could just strictly do with being buffed, but she's doing a bit better at the moment, and she rightfully deserves a spot in the B tier rather than being a high C tier option. Other picks within the B tier, towards the lower end, the likes of Lee Sin, still just not that performant. He's incredibly popular, and he'll maintain his popularity no matter how weak or strong he is. Right now, though, he's under the bar. He's just not as good as some of the other options. Zed and Talon obviously quite heavily compared with each other, and Zed is just the weaker option out of the two at the moment. They are commonly played as Smurf champions, and if you are very comfortable on them, you will 1v9 games a lot of the time on these champions. I would recommend leaning towards Talon at the moment, and Talon is beginning to see some competitive play. I believe TT played Talon and T1 played Talon. Actually, was it TT or Toppy Sports? I think Toppy Sports played Talon, actually. But in the T1 game, he performed incredibly well, and I can't help but feel like we might start seeing more Talon jungle when he's already gaining popularity over time, and he might just end up being nerfed at some point, maybe even next patch. So play Talon whilst you can. In the case of Zed, though, which is the champion I'm supposed to be talking about here, he does have an incredibly fast clear, and if you can play him well, you can perform on him. I don't really recommend him if you don't play him, though. Graves sits towards the low end of the B tier. He's just below average. He's not that great of an option. I don't really recommend him at the moment. But if you can perform on him, then yeah, he can be a bit more niche compared to some of the other options. He's definitely not in his prime kind of state at the moment, but he does have an audience. He's still quite popular. Ramos sits within the B tier. For an easy champion to play, he's pretty bad, and Riot are planning on doing something to him to alleviate the strict AD to armor to AD to magic damage like split, like which you need to play against this champion. Like Ramos is really good into AD compositions but really bad into AP compositions, and they're planning on softening that a bit. So Ramos sits towards the low end of the B tier at the moment, but there is hope for the champion. I do think that the changes, if they end up being like the right direction for him, can really help him and put him in a far better spot. Zac is a below average tank at the moment. He's one of the tanks which actually performs a decent amount better in elite. Like if you are someone who's like relatively mid to high elo and you're comfortable in the champion, then yeah, he's probably a pick I'd recommend a bit more. If you're a lower elo player, then I would probably recommend some of the easier options, things like your Amumu's and your Nunus. Either have the strength of being relatively niche or just very easy to play. So yeah, Zac sits in the middle of the B tier. I think he's a fine option if you play him. Teemo, pretty niche, or a pretty niche AP pick. If you're comfortable playing Teemo, he did benefit from some of the changes to the AP items this patch, so yeah, you will feel a bit better about that. Liandry did get nerfed, but like things like Malignance, Nasher ended up being buffed if you do opt into those items. He's a solid B2 option, performs better in low elo, worse in high elo, and yeah, he sits here for the moment. Shyvana lost win rate this patch because Liandry got nerfed and she goes out a lot of the time second, and Nasher got buffed, which encouraged people to go Nasher first, which is just not good. Like Nasher first on Shyvana is still very, very underperforming. This champions needs her rework sooner rather than later. I don't know if it's coming within the next year though, and she's a bad option. I honestly think she probably sits towards the lower end of the beta at the moment. Just a pick I really do recommend avoiding unless you already play her and you're looking for a champion which maybe can get you to like Emerald and then pretty heavily falls off. Mordekaiser sits within the beta. He's a solid niche option. The Angie being nerfed affected him. He sits as still a mid-beta option though. I think if you play him, you can perform on him. If you don't, you're probably not going to play him, but he is there as an option. Jack sits within the beta, a good counter pick. Outside of a counter pick situations though, you don't really play Jax. He's also niche. Like, you don't need to play him if you don't already play him, but if you play him, then yeah, you can find the spots where he will work. Karthus lost power because of Liandry being nerfed, but he is still a solid beta option. Scales incredibly hard with mastery. Like, if you are very good at Karthus, this champion is still one of the best options in the game. If you don't, then he sits as a pretty average beta option. Like, he's slightly below the bar, but he does an insane amount of damage. And if you can utilize that well, then yeah, he can be really good. Udyr sits within the beta. This champion is actually a low beta option now. The Liandry nerfs do affect him, and he's pretty heavily dependent on OTPs as well. This champion doesn't perform that well for the average player in his current state. Shaco performs better on the AP variations than the AD variations, albeit it's not like absurdly, like the gap isn't absurd anymore. And if you prefer playing AD, then I think AD Shaco can definitely work in a lot of situations. But AP obviously performs a bit better in low elo. Liandry's did affect it. Like, it is slightly weaker if you do opt into Liandry's on Shaco, AP Shaco jungle. And yeah, generalistically, I think the champion's in a fine spot. You do want to put games into him though. I think if you don't have games into him and you clear him maybe not as effectively as some of the other, like as some of the Shaco mains, and you don't really use the kit to full extent, he can definitely struggle a bit more. And yeah, I'd say he sits as a pretty solid beta option at the moment. Olaf, an incredible counterpick champion. I think if you find the right spots for Olaf jungle, he is an incredibly good pick in his current state. He is also incredibly unpopular. People won't know how to play against this champion, and you can definitely find spots in the game where he is really, really good. Kindred and Bel'Veth. I'm honestly just going to pair these two champions together at the moment. They're pretty similar in the way they function. They're elite skewed for the most part, but if you get advantages on these champions, you can comfortably take over games, especially if you're comfortable playing them. Like, they do require a lot of mastery to really, like, get the most out of the champions, and yeah, they are pretty predicated on like early game invades and how you use the map to effectively take over the game. Darius sits within the beta. He's definitely like lost a lot of his popularity. He's really dropped since like the whole Darius jungle incident where he became like the most popular jungler in the game for a patch. He sits as a beta option now. I think if you play him still, then yeah, you can find the angles where he really works, but he's not the same champion. The clear's a lot slower, and he is just a slight bit weaker now. So yeah, sits as more like a beta option. Hecarim, I feel like this champion over time has been spoken about a bit more. He's definitely on the resurgence. I don't think he's amazing. I think there can be spots where he can be really good, and I think he's a lot harder to play than some of the previous iterations. But if you already play him, then yeah, I think you can definitely find the spots where this champion can really work. And OTPs are performing well on the pick at the moment. So Hecarim, I think if you can find the right spots, definitely a champion worth considering again, especially with like some of the like just the general resurgence of the champion. Moving up from the B tier to the A tier then, we lead off with Ivan, and actually Ivan and Trundle are the two champions moving up. Trundle's doing pretty well in the jungle at the moment. His win rate's really high. I still don't like the pick that much. I think he's a bit conditional, and he has issues with his clear and how he functions within the game. But there's no doubt about the fact that he's really easy to play. He's very stat checky, and once you get access to items, you can begin to clear quite quickly. So a pick which I would start considering again as well. And yeah, I'm going to bump him up from the B tier to the A tier. The other champion that I'm going to move up is Ivan. Ivan's been sat as like a high beta option for a while now, and I think it's time to add him to the A tier. There are AP variations of Ivan which do work, and I have seen high elo Ivans perform quite well on Malignants. I believe I had one in the last game I played, or one of the recent games I played actually, and yeah, it does a lot of damage. You can definitely have a lot more agency with it, and I like it as an option. I don't think it's a build you should go every game, but if you are looking for a bit more agency, then don't sleep on it. Definitely a good way of building the champion. Amumu sits towards the low end of the A tier. This champion isn't as performant at the moment. It's still good in low elo, like really good as a low elo option. The amount of CC this champion can provide, combined with the damage and the ease of play, all really good. Liandry nerf does affect him. Like, you are not going to clear as fast, you're going to do less damage within the game, and that is meaningful for the champion. He was also already a bit on the downwards, and there's an argument that he can maybe drop down to B tier, because he just isn't that good when you are looking to get to like Emerald, Diamond compared to some of the other options. But for a low elo pick, he's still one of the best tanks, and I really do recommend him. If you are within the Gold to Platinum, even Emerald range. Moving up. Oh, I mean, the other champions within the A tier are Poppy, who is actually towards the high end of the A tier. This pick is doing quite well in the jungle at the moment. The buffs she's received, combined with just the direct jungle buffs, have helped her a lot, and she's definitely found her footing a lot better at the moment. Vi drops from the A tier down to the B tier. The nerfs she received this patch were meaningful, and there is an argument that maybe down the line she could probably even drop down to the C tier. She wasn't that performant in solo queue. She was kind of like a hanging on A tier pick, and yeah, the changes, she lost damage in her Q, she lost damage through her E, she lost damage through her R even as well, and those are all meaningful parts of her kit. Her burst potential is a substantial amount lower, and yeah, she drops from the A tier to the lower end of the B tier now. The other champion dropping down from the A to the B tier is Fiddlesticks. He's still a high beta option. It's just the nerfs were like meaningful, but they do affect him. He doesn't have anywhere. Well, his Q doesn't have as much damage up until like 300 AP, which is a lot of AP to get on like Fiddlesticks jungle, especially if you are opting to Liandry still. Malignance doesn't look as performant as Rockabouts. I think Rockabouts is his most performant option at the moment, and the W change is nice, like 5% AP ratio buff on the W. It does help him, but the nerf is more meaningful. You are going to lose damage through not having a target CC'd as long now, and that does affect the champion. So he does drop from the A to the high end of the B tier. Other champions within the A tier are the likes of Wukong. I realized Na is here. That was probably meant to be Gragas. That's quite funny. Wukong is still really good in the cracked spots against like your AD champions, where you can really make use of your passive and into compositions which really have a hard time dealing with his Cyclone. I think this pick is really, really good, and he still, I believe, sees a decent amount of competitive play. Like my competitive memory isn't as good for jungle at the moment. Yeah, Wukong still sees a decent amount of competitive play. He's like number 7, I believe, from what I can see here, in terms of picks. And yeah, I mean, rightfully so. It makes sense. He's good into like your AD options, like your Xin Zhao's he can be quite good into, your Viegos, for example. And yeah, he's a deserving A tier option. Boya, an incredibly low elo skew pick, and she performs really well there at the moment. She does struggle a lot in high elo, and there is an argument that something should be done about this champion. But right now, she still remains as an A tier option. I think she is a good way to climb to Diamond. You'll probably start struggling the higher up you go. Talon is the definitive Smurf jungle at the moment. Every time I play on my Smurf, I see Talon. Like, Talon is just by far and away the most popular jungler for kind of that direction of play. That being said, though, yeah, his map coverage, like the fact that his E just enables him to be around the map so quickly, combined with his relatively good clear speed, his invade potential, the damage this champion can output, I think he's an incredible pick for that and very deserving an A tier option. I think if you're good at Talon, then he can be one of the best options to go to in the game, but for the average player, he's not quite as good. He's definitely more of a Smurf jungler. Pantheon, a great option. I love Pantheon jungler at the moment. I think he's a very good AD pick, and has great, like, his ultimate's an incredible tool. His isolated drawing potential is very high. He's great gank setup with a point and click CC. A good pick, which I really do recommend playing at the moment. Diana, still a good AP option, but a bit weaker. She lost a substantial amount of power from Liandry being nerfed, because Liandry was a item which was performing well on her. Nasha, I believe, is still slightly less performant than Liandry, although the gap is very close now, so you can kind of opt into whichever one you need within the game. But she probably sits more like a lower A tier option at the moment. Dr. Mundo, a very popular champion in specifically EU West. Some of the other regions do play him a bit, but like Mundo is like 3 times as popular in EU West compared to like the global scale, which is really interesting to see. I believe like Natty Nat probably had a big part to play in that and really popularized Mundo jungle. That being said, though, he's a great pick, and I understand why. This pick, if you can get through the early game, incredibly tanky, does a huge amount of damage, scales really well, has good objective taking, has a pretty amplified kit for jungle clearing, so yeah, makes sense. This champion is a very solid A tier option at the moment. Kha'Zix is a very good A tier pick as well. This champion actually gained a substantial amount of win rate this patch, which is interesting to see. I'll be interested, like, if it continues long term, like his win rate like stays at around what it is. And if it does, then yeah, he's probably an S tier pick. Right now, though, I think he's still a very high A tier option. Like, still maintain kind of reviews from like the previous patch on Kha'Zix. The passive buffs not too long ago really helped him, allows him to like find those kills in isolation a lot more consistently. And the damage this champion can output when snowballing or with an advantage is incredible. He's a very, very high agency jungler if you are comfortable playing him. If you're not, then there's an argument that you should probably be playing other options like your Zinzals and your Jarvans, but Kha'Zix, perfect AD assassin at the moment. I really do recommend playing him. Kayn drops towards the lower end of the A tier. I would have recommended Kayn at around the same level as Kha'Zix, but I think there's a bit more of a clear gap now with the health growth nerf to Kayn. He is squishier in blue form, he is squishier in red form, and that is meaningful. Master Yi sits within the A tier. Still an incredibly valuable pick with gold. Like, if you can get access to a huge amount of golden XP within the game, Yi is one of the best champions like to go to. You do oftentimes find yourself like trading 1-for-1, and that is like a very much like core part of this champion and how it plays. And then the right games, like the low CC games, this champion can take over. It can be a very, very valuable pick to have within your arsenal. If you don't already play it, he's a bit harder to play. I think he over time has like gained a lot of like you need a lot more skill to play Yi. I don't think he is quite as brain dead as an option, unless you're in the very low ranks where just being able to stat check and do so much damage within the game can be a valuable aspect of play. Viego sits a high A tier option. The kind of like rise of collective Viego has just maintained his spot as a high A tier option. Not much to say on this champion. He's a pretty perfectly all-round option. Once you get a takedown within a fight, you can oftentimes find yourself snowballing and being really, really powerful within the game. Volibear, still a great jungle option. I've managed to not have Volibear on here either. I've missed a couple of champions. Don't do that a huge amount. Volibear sits in the A tier. Still one of the junglers I really do recommend. His tower dives are so simplistic in the way they function, combined with the point and click CC. Start checking nature of this champion. He's a very perfect jungler, and I really do recommend him as an option. Dropping down from the S tier to the A tier is Lilia, who actually probably sits towards the lower end of the A tier. The Liandry nerf did definitely affect her, and she is meaningfully weaker. Combined with, and in the case of Neferi, she got directly nerfed this patch. She now sits as a reasonably balanced A tier option. She still sees a decent amount of competitive play, and I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up receiving another nerf. But right now, yeah, I'd say she's a bit more balanced for solo queue in her current state. In the S tier then, have I missed some? I feel like I've missed a couple of options. Actually, Eve jumps up from the B to the A tier. The buffs towards the AP assassin items this patch really helped her. And it also helped Echo and Elise, who are both being bumped up to my S tier. Storm Surge being buffed, Lich Bane being buffed, Rabadon being buffed. All these champions are doing a huge amount better. Elise is really like skyrocketed all the way from like the high beta to like the S tier. I think this champion is really, really good, especially if you can take over early and if you have good mastery on the champion. I mean, all three of these champions need good mastery. If you don't already play them, then you need to put some level of games into them. You can't just first time them and expect good results. But yeah, they're all doing really well at the moment. I really do recommend them. Yorick, I'm going to actually drop down to the A tier as a high like A tier option. He performs really well in low elo as a jungler, and the higher up you go, he definitely struggles a lot more. But yeah, just the genuine strength of the summon combined with the clear speed and the dueling potential of this champion just give him so much strength in that bracket of play. And if you are below the rank of Emerald, I think Yorick is probably one of the best options you can go to just climbing to one of those your Emeralds, your Diamonds, for example. Nunu sits within the S tier. He's still an incredibly good jungler. Even with the Liandry nerf, which he does opt into sometimes, he can still opt into things like Rocket Belt if you are playing AP. And just like your tank builds can still function quite nicely on this champion. Yeah, he's a great jungler, especially for snowballing and yeah, just taking over the game. He's also pretty niche, and people won't respect the gank potential this champion has. Jarvan and Xin sit towards the lower end of the S tier. They're not quite as performant as some of the other S tier options, but just for their simplicity and their the early game strengths these champions have. In the case of Jarvan, his lockdown, the tools he can provide can be really valuable, and Xin Zhao has a bit more agency. The damage that this champion can output, combined with the defensive ultimate which he has, just give him so many tools to work with. The main problem with Xin, well, not so much problem, but Xin did get nerfed this patch. He's no longer what I'd recommend as #1 jungler, but he's still one of the S tier options. Still think this pick is really easy to play and a very good just jack of all trades jungler. He's like the Renekton of the jungle. And then Warwick and Nocturne wrap up my S tier. In the case of Warwick, he's an incredibly slept on jungler, and he will probably continue to be slept on. If you play Warwick, you probably know this champion is incredibly strong in his current state. And then Nocturne, he's always been in the S tier. He maintains his spot within the S tier. He's a pretty healthy, the way he functions is a pretty healthy way of just being a jungler, where you are a power farm till 6 and then you just use your ultimate off CD to kind of make plays around the map. And if you're good at it, it will oftentimes consistently work, and it is a good way of climbing. If you struggle with that kind of playstyle, then yeah, you'll probably be better off looking towards some of the other options. But he is a good champion to just learn the power of an ultimate with, and making sure you're utilizing the effective map coverage of the ability. My recommended picks are Warwick if you're looking for Warwick and Nunu if you're looking for something a bit more niche, but Nocturne, Xin, Jarvan are still all really good options. And then the AP champions which have been on the rise, your Elises, your Echoes, your Eves are all really good in their current states, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do some follow-up mage item changes, or whether they just end up nerfing some of these champions down. But if you do play them at the moment, I would recommend continuing to play them and definitely reaping the rewards of the buffed items. Those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.